Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Live at the Waterhole. Where first up, we're in East Africa, in Kenya, at the Old Donyo Lodge. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirsts and cool off. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth as it appears on your screen. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it on through. As we've got what looks like a Christmas tree on this Maasai giraffe, with all of those red-billed oxpeckers pecking away, combing through the hair and picking up on any ticks that they can come across. Called sanguinivores because of their love of feeding on blood. That's what they love. So sanguinivore is the name for that kind of feeder. That's exactly what they do. So mostly eating ticks, but sometimes, so it's a symbiotic relationship that benefits the giraffe. Sometimes when there's wounds, they might keep it open and then become parasitic. So they're not always friendly and helpful for the giraffe. We very often see them doing that on hippos, who don't really have ticks on them because of them loving to live in water. But they very often have war scars and wounds that the oxpeckers are able to open up and get into the blood. So that's what they do there. Oh, and a couple of zebra coming to join. Wonderful. Joanne Mello saying happy Tuesday, WildEarth. Let's explore the watering holes. Lovely to have you on board, Joanne. And Rebecca Bishop saying hi, Ralph. Good to have you here. And lovely to have you with us as well, Rebecca. Look at all of these oxpeckers. That's incredible. I think they're keen to come down for a drink. And remembering also that they are cooperative breeders. So generally, you'll have one family group that will be on an animal alone. But this seems a lot of individuals. But it's possible. They could all be from the same family. And Mercedes Bean saying, greetings, Ralph. Ready to see what we will see. Happy Tuesday. And a lovely start here at Old Donyo. These zebra here, they seem to be squeaky clean. If you compare them to the likes of the zebra at Madikwe and other parts, I think these ones aren't really getting dirty dust on them. They seem super clean and not very dusty like the rest of them. Maybe it's the tropical landscape that they find themselves in, and there's an elephant in the background as well. So Erica Oldno asking and saying, hi Ralph, what are we delving into today? Well, that's the question, Erica. I like when the conversation is viewer driven. So if you've got any topics that you'd like to discuss, it's nice if we're discussing something about the animals that we're looking at, or at least a subject that involves them. So whatever it is, if anybody's thinking of different topics that you would like to know more about, or whatever it is, send it on through. See that youngster? There's two youngsters there. They still got their fluffy coats, and it's quite brown on top of their backs. So when they're young, they seem to be a little bit more brown, and they've got that baby fur. And then later on, as they get older, they lose that, and then it turns completely black. So Rebecca Bishop asking, are they grabbing the zebra's fur or directly into their skin? And I think you're referring to the oxpeckers. So the red-billed oxpeckers, they're real combers. They literally comb through the hair. And if we ever manage to get a nice close-up on them, you can actually watch them even now on this giraffe working their bills, but they work it sort of downwards or with the flow of the hair, sometimes going up as well and getting into those, then getting in deeper. But that's how they comb through the hair downwards. And then as they feel any of the little ticks within that, then they'll quickly scoff them up. To be a very good looking female, that giraffe. Beautiful coloration. See the superb starlings just running around here in the foreground. The oxpecker is also coming down for a drink. And cheetahs and other animals commenting, saying such a spectacular scene. Always lovely here, and there's a lot of bird activity today. Some of the big animals hanging around as well. And I think it must add to the irritation in that the giraffe are trying to work out if there's any danger around. And they've got these birds jumping all in and around their head, into their ears, and making a noise while they're doing it. So it must be quite distracting as well, you know, as the ticklish nature of their feet and their claws as they're jumping around in their hair too. So speaking of the ticks and the oxpeckers that feed on them, I just did a little bit of digging and I found a lovely journal written by G.J. Gallivan and I.G. Horak for the Department of Veterinary Tropical Diseases from the University of Pretoria and Onderstepoort. Speaking of the body size and habitat as determinants of tick infestations of wild ungulates in South Africa, as we watch this huge individual making his way on over here. Because I remember when we studied wildlife management, there was at some stage a real representation of different ungulates and how many ticks they have on them, or on average on any given day. Obviously, it is seasonal, and as we say, the location as well and the habitat that they're in. So it would be different for different areas. Tropical here, they obviously have a lot more versus the likes of Namibia in a desert, would have a lot less. So it would need to be proportional. But the purpose of this work was to test the hypothesis that the intensity of tick infestation on South African wild ungulates is proportional to the surface area of the host, or the body weight, and to assess the role of the habitat preference on the intensity of infestations. The results support previous suggestions that larger ungulates are more important hosts for adult ticks. However, the intensity of infestation of nymphs and larvae is proportional to the surface area of the host. So grazers had a lower intensity of infestation than browsers and intermediate feeders. And the difference was most pronounced in the 30 to 150 kilogram weight range, within which the grazers were predominantly short grass grazers, utilize habitats less suitable for ticks. And these patterns appear to be consistent within the three major collection areas of Kruger National Park, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Mountain Zebra National Park. Now the sun coming through like that, this is an amazing scene. Giraffe now joining. Glad the giraffe now finally getting in for a drink. Still with the irritating oxpeckers. And the other big bull on his way through. So let's watch as these two bulls now will obviously have to interact. You can see on his approach already putting his penis out, which is part and parcel of the sort of greeting ceremony. And bull elephants will often do this, dropping out the penis when they sort of see another male and make inroads to go towards him. And they often do that as well with vehicles when they see us on foot. So it's really, I think, a show or an attempt to show dominance as part of that. So it might be a head shake or just the way that it walks, but that's definitely part of it. So these bulls definitely are interacting. You can see the new arrivals just pointing his trunk towards the other every now and then. So smelling it. But there's probably also vocal communication going on that we can't really hear. And of course body language between them as well. So Sandy saying that wild African elephants may address each other using individualized calls that resemble the personal names used by humans. And a new study has suggested this. And I must agree with that. I've been through a lot of studies and journals throughout my time on the show here and before that as well. And all the studies suggest that there's so much to the communication between elephants that we don't understand, but we're starting to realize some patterns and working out that they definitely are as intelligent as we've always thought. And the communication is very intricate as well. And I would not be surprised if there is personalized names for each other. Probably not in our traditional sense of Henry and Peter, but maybe it's the one that lives by the big old baobab, or the one that walks with a limp, or the one with the big tusks, or it might not even be the one. Obviously, we're thinking of a language that we speak, but in some way or form, they will be recognizing each other and making sounds and noises resembling some form of language that they will then be identifying each other with. So Rebecca Bishop saying that her and her partner were watching a video from Casual Geographic, a YouTube channel, and they did one about elephants that really opened their eyes to how amazing and intelligent they are. It never gets old, Rebecca, and I hope you enjoy watching them, because we do see a lot of airtime from elephants, especially at this time of the day. So a lot of the discussions very often centered around them because of that. And Miriam asking, have oxpeckers ever tried to land on humans? Miriam, I'm not sure. I've never heard of it. I'm sure it's possible, and it probably has happened, but I don't know, unless you were walking around full of ticks, which I've done. but they sort of climb up into the hidden areas. It's so difficult for an oxpecker to land on somebody and actually go for ticks if they're not sort of crawling up your leg, which is often what they do. As you walk through the grass, they just hang their little arms out, and as you walk past, they grab on, wee, and then start crawling up to get into soft areas that they can, settle in and start getting into your blood. And with that ticks in mind, a little bit of a discussion on that, and a lovely blog from Kapama written by Timothy Verriane, who's the ranger at the Southern Camp. He says that most guests visit wildlife areas to see all the large animals you may find, maybe some of the smaller creatures that are easily seen. But one of the small ones most people miss, however, are ticks. Unless you go walking a lot, you won't miss them. They'll let you know they're there. But ticks belong to the arachnid family, and there are millions of them all around most wildlife areas, but almost never seen because of their small size. You normally start scratching before you see them, actually. And some animals, like giraffe, can host up to about 7,000 ticks, and others, like buffalo, almost around 10,000, and this is at the same time. And although they might be of little significance to these animals, only one tick on a human can cause severe illness, particularly what we call tick bite fever, which can be very dangerous as well. And this just goes to show how incredible these animals' immune systems must be. Often on game drives, we notice a small bird, and on the show as well, we see the oxpecker on the animals, and they actually feed on these ticks, and even sometimes the terrapins will also take ticks off of hosts while they're wallowing or cooling down in a waterhole. And another bird that is... Ooh, hello. I obviously disagreed. Not very happy. I was actually thinking on his approach that he was potentially pushing his luck, because he didn't seem to be as big as this one that was here before. Didn't have his big tusks, and just his demeanor was a little bit aggressive. So I think he's been told off. I just think that the perspective of this camera is fascinating as well, because you don't really get that same feeling from a lot of the other water holes, and you're not quite as part of the sighting. I would say you're more looking over it. And in this instance, yeah, it's quite similar to cat eye as well. It almost feels like you're lying on the ground watching these animals as they go about their business. And with such big elephants here as well, it's absolutely fascinating. So Tracy was saying that that was intense. It was. I think it was a proper rebuke. He's been thoroughly told off and not to try that again, whatever it was. I just think that it was his approach to things, and he was pushing his luck. So just a little bit of picture breakup there at Old Donyo. So we've headed on over to Okukuyu in the Etosha National Park of Namibia, the Great White Place. And as you can see, the east wind is blowing. So it'll be nice and hot, and hotter as you get down towards the coast. That's for sure. You can see it moving through the leadwood tree leaves there on the left, and it's even moving that around. So it must be quite strong. So while we're waiting for some of the animals to come in for a drink here, there's odd springbok moving around in the background there and in the foreground. And I'm sure there'll be oryx and zebra and wildebeest coming through. It's a real turnstile here. It can be quiet for a little bit, but won't be for long. And Asbo says, "Hi, Ralph. We've all heard the stories about elephant graveyards. But do you think elephants or animals in general have any concept of death?" Um, and it's obviously an important question because, we value, or intelligent animals value life and have a fear of death, sort of in general. And that's why they fight to survive. But I found a lovely blog from Mahlatini, and they speak of animals that mourn their dead on the same topic. So this blog comes with a warning for animal lovers: beware, have the tissues at the ready. This blog is all about how animals mourn their dead. And while many scoff at the very notion of such a thing, there's evidence to suggest that animals do indeed process death. They do so by exhibiting different behaviors and through a menagerie of rituals. Yet the overall demeanor of these animals changes in the same inexplicable way, exuding an aura of deep depression and sadness. Strangely enough, a great deal of these animals reside in Africa. So we're going to give you Africa's top 5 animals known to mourn their dead. And of course, elephants, as you've mentioned, Asbo, definitely up the top there. And the fact that these magnificently intelligent creatures top the list should come as no surprise. They react to death in a variety of ways and do so within many unique contexts. One example of this is glimpsed in the reaction of an elephant mother to the death of her newborn calf. And there was one called Tony who refused to leave its side even after the rest of her herd had moved on. She stood out under the scorching sun, defending the calf against all comers, including lions, for 4 days. There's also many instances on record of baby elephants waking up screaming if they witness their mothers being murdered, and a story of a family of elephants attempting everything to wake up a dead family member, from sitting her upright to placing grass in her mouth. Another known ritual involves the burying of the deceased. They'll place dirt and branches over their dead group member and stay with the body for a period of several days. And then they're also known to exhibit such behavior to humans as well. And I know from evidence of the desert elephants where individuals have died and they've gone and spent literally hours, if not days, moving around the bones that would have, been an individual that died years previously. But still, they go into those spots with no other apparent reason for food or for water, except that the carcass is there and the bones and the remains. Chimpanzees. Now, a young chimp named Flint reacted to the death of his mother Flo with harrowing grief, as observed by chimp expert Jane Goodall. And Flint was overly attached to his mother and failed to leave her care at the usual age. So depression quickly set in to the young chimp, but his older brother, Fegan, and the rest of his group managed to cheer him up for a while. Shortly after, Flint left the group and returned to the place of his mother's death from old age. And he refused to eat and became increasingly ill, appearing a shadow of his former self, seeped in depression and gaunt. And after weeks spent pining, Flint curled up and passed away himself, only but a few feet away from where his mother died. It's a sad story, but reflecting the real depression that has come from the passing of another, especially one so close as your mother. Baboons. When Sylvia the baboon's grooming partner and daughter Sierra were killed by a lion, she looked to other members of her group for support. It caused the otherwise snobbish monkey to look to those below her hierarchical ranking, and scientists noticed there was a rise in Sylvia's glucocorticoid levels at the time of the incident. The glucocorticoid relates to stress levels in the body, so it's clear that Sylvia found the experience less than pleasant, and her embrace of lower ranking females for company and companionship is proof of her desperation through grief. I still think it's difficult to measure grief and depression and whether it's ultimately directly related to the passing of another individual or because of a change of circumstance in your own personal experience. I'm not sure which it is and to what extent they do, but there is definitely, I mean, we see through the evidence that there is an obvious reaction to death and mourning, but in the true sense of that grief for another, could it not be more grief for the change in your own circumstance? Maybe both. So a little bit more Springbok, but it's taking a bit of time. So I think we'll change of place for now. Let's go back to this time South Africa, the Madikwe Game Reserve, and Tau. Where we have the ever-present waterfowl, a couple of the common moorhens, and then blue wildebeest, just relaxing on the water's edge. Yeah, the little blue waxbills and the chin spot batters. So Wendy was asking, are there any other animals that communicate in a similar fashion to elephants? Wendy, I would say that all of the highly intelligent creatures are similar in the way that they communicate. I would say whales and dolphins have a similar way of communicating, however, different tones or pitches from the actual noise that they make. But I think with that intelligence that they do form some kind of language and identification of individuals and are able to describe things or at least, point other animals in a direction of where food might be or whatever it is. So I think those three are quite similar in the way that they do communicate. And a couple of commonalities between them. They're all able to communicate over vast distances through the water. Obviously, it's denser than the air, and so is the ground. So whales and dolphins, using that medium, that sound will travel further in, and elephants use rumblings within the ground to take it further as well. So quite interesting in those similarities. The yellow-breasted apellis calling now. Apellis, apalis, whatever way you want to say it. Pill-spotted owlet calling now in the background. Either that or something's mimicking one. Now, P Soul was asking, would fish exist in this pond? Absolutely, P Soul. What I can guarantee is that there will be catfish. They have an uncanny ability to just almost seemingly appear out of nowhere when there's a new water body. But I think it's mainly down to the likes of birds, the waterfowl that will transport their eggs. Both, because they lay their eggs. It's almost similar to frogs, where they've got like the sticky substrate with the eggs embedded on it, so it sticks on everything. And I think the birds transport it through flying between different water bodies, and I think sometimes also that they've eaten the eggs and they defecate. But by whatever means, the catfish, it's a sharp tooth catfish. It's the only catfish that we have in our freshwater systems, and as I say, in literally every single one. Um, and so transported by, I would say, birds, and then they grow prolifically, and they can survive also inside dried up water holes as well. They'll encase themselves in the mud, and they can survive like that for a few years even. And if the water hole fills up again, suddenly you've got big, fully grown catfish, and they can get into huge sizes. It all depends on the size of the water hole, though. But catfish over 50 kilograms is not unheard of. But generally, in these kind of water holes, it's rather shallow. You're probably looking at between 500 grams and a kilogram fish. And as the name suggests, they've got whiskers. So that's what we call them, barbel, because those whiskers are termed barbels on the side of their mouths. It's to help as they sort of forage in the dark, muddy waters, and they feel anything with those whiskers, and they snap it up with a suction in their mouth. So they'll very quickly dispatch whatever they feel that moves. They are carnivorous. They will eat other fish and invertebrates and all sorts. Whatever moves, really. And so they're also probably the scavengers of the water and the cleanup crew, much like vultures would be for the animals outside of the water. There's a nice looking impala ram just grazing. There's not much activity anymore on that bush with all the weaver nests. They've done their thing, and they're not breeding anymore. So there's one of our individual crocodiles out on the water's edge on the bank. It was out yesterday as well. So It's at this time of the year that you do see them out of the water more. Obviously, it's colder, they're ectothermic, and so they're just trying to sun themselves and get a bit of energy. I'm sure overnight it gets rather cold, and they'll be then lethargic as a result. I'm just wondering how this individual actually got mud on its back. I wonder if it's really been slithering around in the mud so much that it's gone all the way over the top of it. Not quite sure. Unless an elephant's used it as a foot scratch. The elephants were here yesterday and there was a breeding herd of them. A couple of the youngsters got a bit of a fright with the crocodiles there, and then seemed the adult females took them all away from the two crocodiles that were here. There's a grey go-away bird calling. Okay, so I don't think that this crocodile is going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But we're going to head off to Juma. With a wonderful herd of buffalo. That is great to see. I wonder how many there are. Seems like quite a big herd. And then I have to say it, you have to think that the lions are somewhere not too far behind them. When I was on Juma, we always used to get excited when we saw the buffalo because we knew that the lions wouldn't be too far behind, and it would be the Nkuhumas or the Styx Pride. Normally one of those two. Nice to see a good mix of ages. There's a little youngster. And just like the zebra, the foals have a bit more of a browny color. It's very similar with the buffalo as well. You can see they're starting to lose it, and then they get more of a black tone to them. But that's that real baby fur. So Vicky T was asking, from how far can lions sense prey? Now, the biggest sense that they would use, Vicky T, is the sense of smell. Um, and it depends on, the sort of strength of the animal's smell and the strength of the wind, because they could smell these buffalo from a few kilometers away. That I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of them. And as they walk, they're obviously defecating as well, and there's a real smell about them. And if the wind had to blow, into the direction of the lions, I say they can smell these guys from far off. So that's generally how they would get around. They can also smell them as or where they've walked through the grass, and once again their dung as well. So they'll be able to follow them, even if they are a few kilometers behind. They can catch up. So sometimes, the buffalo moving now, it's not necessarily that the lions are sort of following on behind them as such. It's they might just be sleeping up, and then as the sun starts to set, they might then take up the trail once more and catch up with him. Now, I think it's quite interesting to discuss about buffalo and the way that they move around and the different sort of groupings within the herd. And we often speak of pathfinders, because the movements of a herd of buffalo are determined by specific individuals within that, and we call those pathfinders. They're not necessarily the dominant animals, but they simply act as leaders to the herd. I think they sound like orcs from Lord of the Rings. But anyway, each sub-herd within the major herd also has a pathfinder, which will lead its members when the herd splits up. Due to the necessity to find suitable grassy pastures and water on an ongoing basis, buffalo are not territorial, although they do move within more familiar home ranges, which more or less excludes other buffalo herds. Home ranges can expand or shrink depending on the shortage or availability of resources, respectively, and you don't have as much split up or break-offs of the herds, particularly in areas where you have high concentrations of big predators, and specifically lions. So that's where they tend to stick together, and there's not as much breakup. And of course, we know about the Duggar boys, the very old bulls that have passed their reproductive peak. It's from about 10 years of age. And they're usually found alone or in small groups. And we call them Duggar boys, the Zulu word for mud, and refers to the pastime of wallowing in the water or in the mud. It's like that clay mud that's used for construction of huts and things traditionally. And these individuals often have skin diseases or old battle wounds. And it's believed that the water and the mud helps to soothe the aches and pains. So you often find them, and we've seen that a lot, where you just see a few individuals lying on their own in the mud. Those are Duggar boys, old bulls left behind by the herd, and just waiting out their last days. So, but with that, those animals then lack the protection of the herd, so are susceptible to attacks from lions. But that means that the cumulative result is that Duggar boys are extremely temperamental and dangerous if you come across them on foot. They don't run, they charge. And an excellent indicator for the presence of buffalo is the yellow-billed oxpecker, because they're almost exclusively only on buffalo. And I have probably had my life saved more than 10 times, at least. It's probably a couple of dozen times, I would say, more likely, by just the call of a yellow-billed oxpecker. It's made me freeze in the bush, back off, and just sort of go around the bush a little bit, and see a sleeping Duggar boy behind a palm tree or in a small mud wallow. And if I didn't hear it, I would have walked right on top of it with a group of people as well each time. So I really do take heed of the call of the yellow-billed oxpecker. And when we do trails assessments and obviously training of trails rangers and trails guides, that is obviously one of those that you sort of fail on, because you're not competent if you don't pick up the calls of the oxpeckers that indicate potential danger close by. You're not sort of competent to be able to walk in the bush. So that's, you know, one of the first rules of walking out here. You got to know those calls. So Sanjeev Roy saying that though lions regularly take down buffalo, admires their fighting spirit. Definitely, buffalo don't give up easily, and they will fight back. And sometimes they turn the tables on the lions, having been persecuted by them pretty much their entire lives. So when they do get the chance, they'll also rip a lion apart. And they do that with those horns, which they use to stab and throw the animal around. So it's not very nice to watch, but it's almost the revenge of the buffalo for being persecuted and eaten by the lions pretty much all the time. So then we could ask, is revenge another emotion that animals could potentially feel in wildlife? We spoke of mourning, it's an emotion. So would revenge be an emotional sort of behavior that could be real within wildlife? I think I've seen it in buffalo in the way that they want to kill lions. They don't just kill it, they maim it. And squash it, and it's not nice to see. I've seen the same with baboons, big troop of baboons getting hold of a leopard, which, seems very similar in that kind of relationship. Lions and hyenas, we've seen that regularly too. So I think it's an interesting one, but I definitely think that there is some aspect and truth to it. Is that bull walking a bit gingerly? I'm not sure. Sometimes difficult to tell with buffalo. They look like they've got aches and pains, and but if there's any kind of alarm or whatever, then suddenly there's nothing wrong with them. So it is quite difficult to judge. All right, so most of the herd now dotted about and disappearing off into the thickets and into the background. So I think we'll change, and this time let's go to KwaZulu Natal and Tembe Elephant Park. Where we've got another elephant and a smaller little animal there, a warthog. So just from the behavior of that elephant, I thought there was potentially another one on its way. There might still be one around. There's another little warthog saunters through. Oh, this elephant looking very relaxed. You see that tail swishing. Looks to be in a good mood. Now, yesterday the conversation sort of centered around do we have an elephant problem? And at the end of it, we sort of have come to the conclusion that we have a problem that we need to manage them in the wilderness areas that we have now confined them to. And where they're not confined to those wilderness areas, we need to manage the areas that they move through and the people that they come into conflict with. And I think a major part of that then does conclude that one size definitely does not fit all. And I say that because here at Tembe, very different to the likes of the Kruger National Park or Madikwe Game Reserve. And from the Wild Trust, they say that the elephants of Tembe Elephant Park in northern Maputoland, KwaZulu-Natal, are part of the Maputi Futi Tembe coastal elephant plains population, the only elephant population indigenous to KwaZulu-Natal. This group of elephants used to roam freely into Mozambique from South Africa through what is now known as the Futi Corridor and into the Maputo Special Reserve. But a fence between Mozambique and South Africa along Tembe Elephant Park's boundary was erected in 1989 after the elephants moving between the countries began showing signs of severe trauma from the war going on in Mozambique, displaying bullet wounds and snare wounds from heavy poaching as well. And it was thought best to fence in the Tembe population, which in time grew to the now 250 to 270 elephants that are found in the 30,000 hectare reserve today. And this large population of elephants pose a number of challenges for conservation. Their numbers are too many for the area they occupy, and they're impacting on the biodiversity of the sensitive sand forest vegetation of the Tembe Elephant Park, which forms part of the Maputoland Center of Plant Diversity and Endemism. As declared in 1994 by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, and World Conservation Union, the IUCN. And this distinctive forest type is known to be restricted to northern KwaZulu-Natal and southern Mozambique, and has a unique combination of plant and animal species. So since the 1990s, Izimvelo KZN Wildlife have been working with the Mozambican government to re-establish the link between Tembe Elephant Park and the Maputo Special Reserve to restore the ancient migratory route of the elephants, and this forms part of the Greater Transfrontier Conservation Area plans for the region. This has been a slow process, of course, with bureaucracy and as a holding mechanism to relieve pressure on the sand forest and control elephant numbers growing further. Wildlands Conservation Trust has funded 2 management interventions in Tembe, as we spoke of yesterday, a contraception program for the elephants, and an elephant restraining line that has been put in place, protecting 2,500 hectares of sand forest. So in May 2007, the first group of 82 female elephants was darted with the PZP contraception vaccine. The aim is to dart roughly 80 to 90% of the population in order to have 75% of the population on contraception. If a cow is already pregnant and is darted, the vaccine will not interfere with the pregnancy and the vaccine will not take effect. And in 2002, a further 2007, a further 79 females were darted. The process was repeated in 2008 and 2009. Slightly lower numbers needing to be darted in order to achieve a level of 75% of the population covered. So with a gestation period of an elephant calf being 22 months, many of the elephants darted may have been carrying and would not yet have been on contraception, but there's indications that there are now fewer calves. So Leonard Muller is the Tembe elephant monitor, and he tracks the breeding herds and gets identities for each animal, establishing the structure of the herd in order to establish when the young are born. It will take a number of years before the full effect of the program is felt, which is why such close monitoring of the breeding herds is necessary. Obviously, this has taken place a good decade ago, so and more than that. So I'll try to get a little bit more relevant, recent information. But not only is the contraception program helping to manage elephant numbers as a holding mechanism for later expansion of the range when the population might again be allowed to grow, but the biodiversity conservation objective of reducing the effect of the elephant population on the sand forest in Tembe is being achieved. Vegetation, animal, and bird surveys are yet to be completed for exact results to be established, but it's clear that the sand forest is making a recovery from the damage caused by the elephants. So it's obviously always not definitive to say that if we reduce the numbers, that's the only way to fix the rest of the ecosystem, because it could naturally find that balance. But I think in this instance, where you've got sensitive areas that are heavily impacted by elephants and you've enclosed them and almost forced them to have to stay in this area, they will have a massive impact. So once we do restrict them, we need to manage them. And this was part of our training as well with wildlife management. And when we do get involved, it's when we've changed the environment, so we need to now almost continue with it. But lovely little scene here and chat about Tembe. And I think, as I say, no size will fit all. That's for sure. I think we're going to change of place and head on back to Djuma. Oh, wow. We've got ourselves one of the southern ground hornbills. Haven't seen them in a while, so this is lovely news for me. Normally a couple of them walking around, looking in fantastic condition. What a sight. No, and it looks like some of the buffalo are coming back for a drink. Buffalo are funny like that. Sometimes they'll make the decision to leave, and 5 minutes later, one of them decides to come back, and they all follow. And they can almost go backwards and forwards doing that. Ooh, what's this chap found now? Is that a bone? Something big. Was it an egg? Seems to have broken it up a bit. Was it some maybe lion or hyena scat that's turned white in the sun? Now, this is another contender for best eyelashes in the bush. I think zebra, giraffe, elephants, ostrich, secretary birds, and ground hornbills. All got to be up there. So the southern ground hornbill, they're omnivorous, basically feed on anything they come across, meat, protein. But they're an apex predator. I mean, very big birds, as you can see, and with very few natural predators of their own. They do normally form sort of feeding groups with other groups of animals, sometimes even including baboons and impala. And they're also regarded as a flagship species for the savanna biome because it's a valuable indicator for natural and anthropogenic threats within its range. Because the species is used in traditional medicine across its distribution range, and in some countries, it's actually regarded as the bearer of bad news. Or if it's seen on someone's roof, it's an indication that someone will die in that house. It's also believed to be a protector across its range. It's believed to protect against evil spirits, witchcraft, and lightning spells. Currently classified as vulnerable, um, according to the South African National Biodiversity Institute. You can still hear those buffalo walking away. But them listed as being vulnerable is mainly because, or endangered actually, is because of severe decline in the species range. In South Africa, the range has declined by approximately 50%, and the species numbers have declined by 10% over the last 30 years. They face multiple threats: slow growing species with a low reproduction rate, and a population habitat viability assessment was conducted for South Africa. The population model indicated that the population size of southern ground hornbill in South Africa will slowly increase if anthropogenic mortalities are excluded. So, a conservation plan for the species has been drafted for South Africa with priorities clearly identified, and the plan aims to ensure that the future of the species is secure. So Jenna from the UK was saying, "Good afternoon, Ralph. Do you think empathy is an emotion felt by animals? When I see zebra, wildebeest, etc., being eaten or killed by predators, the rest of the herd take little notice." Once again, Jenna, I think emotional aptitude is tied to intelligence. That's what I believe, because there seems to be trends with the more intelligent the animal is, the more emotions they exhibit. And I think it's the more intelligent of the animals that will exhibit an emotion like empathy, especially because if we look at the likes of hippos, I do think that there is empathy from the hippo towards an animal getting attacked by a crocodile, but it cannot be 100% certain because maybe the hippo is just irritated and doesn't like predators, which it would have the same feeling towards lions, which predates on it. And we see that with elephants having an absolute hatred for predators, especially lions, and the same with buffalo. So, is it the hatred of the predator or is it the empathy for the animal being killed by the predator? I'm not so sure, but I do think that there is something in it with especially those intelligent animals like hippos, elephants, leopards. Um, I think there is some degree of it. But how to know for sure is the question. And that grey go-away bird doesn't like this herd of buffalo being here. You can hear him telling them to disappear. I'm really hoping that we're going to hear and see some yellow-billed oxpeckers, because it's pretty much only when you do see buffalo that you get to see them as well. Otherwise, it's almost exclusively red-billed oxpeckers. Now, I can definitely hear some. It's more of a tsu, tsu, than a chik, chir of the red-billed oxpecker. Now, as opposed to the red-billed oxpecker as well, the yellow-billed are pickers. They're not combers. So they pull the ticks off. They sort of look for the ticks without actually just, it's almost like an industrial way of going through all the hair by combing through it in the method employed by the red-billed oxpeckers. Whereas with the yellow-billed, with they almost being exclusively on buffalo, there's not as much hair, and they just sort of move into the soft areas, especially under the armpits, around the head, very often in the ears, around the back end as well, and under those back legs. And they pick the ticks off just straight. They're not combing through the hair of the antelope and the giraffe and the rest that the red-billed oxpeckers are doing. And as you can see, not as much hair on these buffalo. So a little bit easier for them to just pick it off as opposed to combing through all of the hair that the red bulls do. And now, slowly but surely, I think they're going to move back up into the grazing area off of this waterhole. But who knows? There might be another one that comes down, and the rest of them all come down again. Okay, so lovely to see this herd, and we'll keep an eye on them. But I think in the time being, we'll head on back to Old Daniel. I don't see one ton, but lovely to have these big bulls here with a little bit of a younger one with them as well. So Vic Langford was saying that it's so sad when loss of habitat and old customs and beliefs are responsible for decline in animal numbers, because both are avoidable. I must agree, Vic. Especially, something or an animal that is persecuted around a belief that is obviously a myth or a legend, and then the animal obviously suffers as a result. When they're such lovely birds, and they are in the decline or have been, and so it would be great if we could just change the narrative, and get behind the bird and its plight. Now, just while we're watching these elephants, a little bit of recent conservation news, and I think it's fantastic. And this is from Daily Maverick, and they speak of saving Private Rhino. Environmental history was made on Friday, the 7th of June, 2024, when the last of 120 white rhinos was released into the network of private and communal reserves on the western border of the Kruger National Park. The operation was carried out under a strict veil of secrecy to ensure the security. So it's been over 15 years since the poaching crisis first hit the Greater Kruger, and heightened demand for rhino horn in Asian markets suddenly sparked an unprecedented onslaught on the world's largest rhino population. It's been impossible to quantify the destruction of the crisis on rhino populations and on ecosystems, but above all, on the hearts, minds, and morale of people who've had to witness this brutality day in and day out. Yet, on Friday, the 7th of June, we celebrate an unexpected milestone amid significant anti-poaching successes. Over the past few weeks, a historic rewilding project has seen 120 southern white rhinos translocated to private reserves along the Kruger National Park's western boundary. The rhino have arrived, marking a successful end to the translocation, which forms part of African Park's Rhino Rewild initiative. And after such protracted devastation in the area, it's a remarkable sign of positivity, progress, and hope. And let's hope that those rhino live a very good life in the Kruger. So these, most of them, it's wattled starlings outside of breeding plumage. When they aren't breeding plumage, they've got these yellow wattles, and they also get a band around the eye. It's like bare skin, and obviously outside they look quite bland. Obviously moving through and feeding inside the elephant dung, which always attracts all sorts. So there's lots to feed on. They're quite a mob, aren't they? You can see that one individual there has a little bit of yellow that I was indicating behind the eye. And off they go. Yeah, maybe the giraffes that chased them off. So seemingly a bit of a youngster in with the older boys, getting to learn the ropes. There come the wattle starlings back again. Oh. I think it's the day of disputes amongst the elephant bulls, and you see the giraffe off. He's out of there. Something that they didn't agree upon. Could this bigger bull have no tail? Maybe he was getting laughed at and he wasn't happy about that. Something just to mention is that I want to tell you about the Amakhala private safari. That's going to be hosted by myself. So if you'd like to join me in the bush in person, well, you can discover the wild heart of South Africa on a safari adventure with me and on Amakhala, the place of many aloes. As you would have seen me on many times, there's a naturalist there, and there's limited space available for 6 lucky guests on the safari from the 1st to the 6th of December this year. And if you'd like to find out any more information, please go onto the WildEarth website and click on travel. So this elephant looks like it's had an injury on its trunk. Looks like it could potentially have been a snare. It does seem to be healing, but you can see there, I think there's still a hole in it. Shame. That's it. That is a real shame. But with it obviously having been treated, because it wouldn't have been able to get that off on its own. So at least we know that it is being looked after. So you see, even elephants aren't immune to the scourge of snares. And they can get them on their trunks, which is terrible for them. It's a shame. Actually, these two have been in the wars. One doesn't have a tail, and the other one nearly lost the end of its trunk. So they've probably got reason to be aggrieved, both of them. So I've got news that from one of the zoomies, just saying that elephant's actually had that injury for about 2 years now. So I'm just glad that it still seems to be doing all right. It does have a bit of a hole in there, but it's a little bit like having your nose pierced, I would say. So you can still see that it can operate, it can function, but it would be better, obviously, if it wasn't like that. But it seems to be doing all right. So Sandy Franklin was asking, do elephants breathe through their mouth or their trunk? Sandy Franklin, much like us, they can do both. So that the trunk is just an evolved nose or an extension of their nose. So if for instance their trunk is in the water, they can still breathe out of their mouth, and then they can spray the water into their mouth, and then they can breathe out of their nose. So, yeah, definitely either. And Joanne Mello saying, thank you, WildEarth and Ralph. Always good to listen, and have a good Tuesday, everybody. Straight back at you, Joanne. I hope you have a lovely day, and I hope you've enjoyed the show. Now, when I was in the Masai Mara, I noticed a lot of elephants without tails. And I see this one also doesn't have one. I don't know if it's from crocodiles or from lions. It's something I haven't worked out 100% sure for now. My best thinking was that it is crocodiles. Some of these rivers and the size of the crocodiles that I've seen, whether it's at a bit of a younger age, and the elephants cross and then they get grabbed on by crocodile, and the elephant will probably just pull its own tail off. But that's the most feasible for me. If you have any other theories, let me know. Nice close up on the wrinkly skin and the lack of a tail. The vibrations as it passes wind. And a nice close-up on this giraffe's coat. Very leopard-like in its coloration and pattern. Oh, I think there's a little bit of argy-bargy between the elephants again. Maybe not so much. The Dark Mane Lover saying thank you, WildEarth, Africam, and Ralph for another amazing live at the Waterhole. And that we all have a wonderful day. Straight back at you, Dark Mane Lover. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you will join us again tomorrow. I'll be here once more as we are coming up to the end of the show. So please don't go anywhere. There's still lots of wildlife action coming your way. You never know what to expect. The only constant out in the bush is change. So, you know, although these elephants are big adults, and it seems like they are being protected, it's not without their challenges. I'm not sure if that one losing its tail is also a result of potential attempt at poaching. You can see what I'm pretty sure of was a snare on this one's trunk. That obviously cut in quite deeply, and that would be, you know, folks poaching for meat. So they put up small snares. It's definitely not targeting elephants. It would be targeting the like of zebra and impala and the rest. But that's indiscriminate what gets stuck in them. So not nice. But it's doing well, and they are resilient, which is the upside. So that's great. So that's it from me for now. We'll see you again tomorrow. Give it horns, bush greetings. Cheers for now.